Only fools and horses are permitted over on BBC One now for more comedy with David Jason and Nicholas Lyndhurst as Del Boy and Rodney. That's except for viewers in Northern Ireland. Here on 2, we slip smoothly into Top Gear with the help of William Woolard and the team.
In tonight's Top Gear, why do thousands of bikers gather on a deserted airfield near Stratford-upon-Avon? We look at the custom machines that keep the cult of biking alive. The new laws on scratch-proof visors for motorcyclists. Does anyone really know about them? And Norton's launch a new bike for the private market. Has an old name become a new force in British motorcycling? Well, in case you didn't gather from the headlines, most of tonight's programme comes from the annual bike show here at the NEC in Birmingham. Bikes, of course, as in motorbikes, had a lot of letters from viewers asking for more of the two-wheel vehicles on the programme, so this is in part at least a response to that request. The show comes at a time when the industry in general is in something of the doldrums. Sales in this country are seriously in decline. In fact, sales of the dominating Japanese manufacturers are in decline all over the world. Not I'm sure that many Europeans will shed any tears over that, given the state of the Japanese trade balance. But in this country, there are real fears still about the safety of biking in general and about the adequacy of the tests for learner drivers. However, more of all that later, because we're starting tonight on 4 wheels with a road test on the Citroën AX. Launched in France last year, came to this country in July of this year. It's tested by the Hensman family with a little bit of help from Sue Baker.
Watch out Metro, Polo, Fiesta, Peugeot 205 and the rest. Here comes Citroën, stirring up the super mini hatchback market this autumn with the new AX. This is the AX11 TRE. It's one of 5 versions in the AX range, and this one has an 1100cc engine and a 5-speed gearbox. It undercuts a lot of the opposition on price, but I don't think it looks a cheapie. It's a nice, clean, smooth body line, a very good drag coefficient, in fact, of 0.31. It's about 4 inches longer than a Metro, but a good deal shorter than a lot of its other rivals. And despite the compact body size, they do cram a lot of space inside. You really do get the feeling that Citroën have given a lot of thought to packaging this car properly for a family on the move. There are little cubby holes all over the place for stowing oddments. I've counted no less than 20 of them all around the car, including these bottle holders in each of the doors. They'll take 1.5 litre bottles or vacuum flasks, so those are very useful indeed. It's a nicely laid out interior. The instruments are very clear, the colour scheming is light and cheerful. The radio is nicely high up, and that's a useful feature. You can get at that easily. But one thing that I think is going to put off some drivers is the driving position. It's very offset to the left. Look how far those pedals are to the left of the position of the steering wheel, and that's a little uncomfortable. It's a useful boot, a good square shape, 10 cubic feet, increasing to 41 when you fold the seats flat. That means you can get in nice big suitcases. And a useful little touch here, this back seat has a choice of 2 positions depending on how much luggage you want to carry behind the passengers. Split fold seat. There is, of course, the usual cover so that when you have less luggage in, you can hide what's underneath. And a nice little touch, there's a light that comes on with the tailgate. On the road, the AX is a very likeable little car. It has a crisp feel to its driving style. It has excellent handling, it rides well, it's quiet. The performance is lively for an 1100cc engine, propelling what is, after all, quite a light body. All-round visibility is pretty good, although there are a couple of blind spots around the rather thick rear pillars. Good view of the instruments through this single-spoke steering wheel, and I do like the single sweep wiper. It gives you a nice clear view. It feels a roomy car for its size, but it does let itself down a bit with the access to the rear seats. That's rather awkward and cumbersome, difficult to get in. One of the Citroën's main competitors is the Peugeot 205. This is the 1.1XL, and it has the feeling of a really fun little car to drive, perhaps even more of a driver's car than the AX. It has a light, spacious and airy feeling. It seems bigger inside than the size of car it is. It shares with the AX a slightly odd driving position with offset pedals, but it does ride and handle very well. Only a 4-speed gearbox though, whereas the Citroën has 5 gears. And where the car lets itself down is in this really rather messy dashboard arrangement. Everything seems very spread out. The radio is not in an ideal position. The choke control is completely hidden away. Down there you can't see it, although there is a warning light to let you know if you've left it on by mistake. A good point though, I think, in this car is the way in which the seats tilt and slide forward. That device, combined with the wide opening doors, gives you very good easy access to the rear seats, rather better than in the AX. Another rival to the baby Citroën is Ford's Fiesta, the best-seller among super mini hatchbacks. This is the 1.1 Popular Plus. The Fiesta's recently undergone a major revamp to bring it more up to date with the opposition, and it does now have a much improved ride. But it's still coarser than the others, and it certainly feels much more cramped inside than the Citroën. The driving position's good, nice, conventional, straightforward, with the pedals straight ahead. I like that. The fascia is nice and clear. It looks a bit Spartan at first, but all the main ingredients are there. Although I do think it's a pity to have so many different types of control switches. And I regard the position of the radio right down there by my ankles as somewhat of a disaster. This one also has only 4 speeds. It's a pity that. Small cars benefit from a 5th gear these days. It's a pleasant feeling little car to drive, and it has earned a reputation over the years of being cheap to run. But it does now feel rather outdated in comparison with much younger, fresher rivals like the AX, and you feel the Fiesta's marking time a bit until its replacement arrives on the scene next year. Bestseller or not, the Fiesta is my least favourite of the 3. I think it looks and feels the oldest design. The Peugeot is the one I like driving the most. It has the feel of a real driver's car. But if you're going to judge these cars all round on price, performance, packaging, I think the AX has the edge. Well, that's my opinion, but let's hear another viewpoint on the AX. We went to Maidenhead to meet the Hensman family, whose normal car is a Renault 11. First, Father Peter.
There's a lot of room inside, which surprised me. Being 6 foot tall in small cars, I normally have problems. I got into the car, put the seat back, and there was bags of room. Driving was fine after I got used to the offset pedal position. The engine in the car is very, very good, very quick, very responsive, and very flexible. We had 4 adults in the car, and it climbed a 1 in 6 hill quite happily. The steering is very light and responsive, and the road holding is very good. It does tend to wallow a little bit on corners when there's only one person in there.
Son Mark is a trainee mechanic, so what did he think?
First impressions under the bonnet is very nice, very compact and yet very well spaced out, all serviceable parts, easily get at for the DIY mechanic. Other parts, such as alternator, fuel pump, they're also easy to get at. It's nice electronic ignition, so there's no messing about with points or anything like that. Got hydraulic tappets, so you don't have to fiddle about doing the tappets, that's always a nasty job. Another nice feature I noticed under the bonnet was the jack and the jack handle. They're under the bonnet, it saves room in the boot. Gearbox is very smooth, selection of gears, very nice, except there's no gate on it for reverse gear. It's a bit of a problem because you can 5-speed box, you can bring it back from 5th straight into reverse.
Joanna, you've only experienced the AX from the back seat. What's your impression?
Well, it's nice. It's quite comfortable, although the seats are rather hard, so when you're going over bumps, there's not really that much give. Also, there's no grab handle, so when you're going around corners, you feel as though you're going to fall a bit, and it would be nice if they put them in. Also, the seats, because my dad's quite tall, he has the seat right back, so it pushes into the back of my knees. So if the back seat was further back, it would be all right. It would be quite comfortable.
And Mum, Catherine Hensman.
Well, it's a nice car to look at, and I did enjoy driving it. The steering is very positive, and the acceleration is good. The instrument panel is nicely laid out. The pedals are slightly offset to the left, which makes it quite difficult when I'm holding down the brake and the clutch together. The seatbelt, it does tend to ride up on my neck when I've been driving for a while, and I have to keep adjusting it. We did also find that the reflections of the top of the dashboard on the windscreen was a little distracting when you were driving.
Well, that's our road test family's verdict on the new little Citroën. Now back to William at the show.
Right, back here at the bike show, and here we are on the Honda stand. Honda have dominated the UK market for the past dozen years or so, and currently they have 37% of that market. And on this stand, you can see examples of all the things the Japanese are doing to try and stop that decline in sales. A greater emphasis, for example, on design, the development of much more powerful, more efficient engines, the widespread use of race test technology in the design of the bike. And this bike, launched at the show, is a typical example of all those things. In fact, of course, this is the cutaway version. That's the real one over there. Called the VFR 750R. It's derived directly from the bike that's dominated Formula One bike racing for the past half dozen years or so. In fact, this is a racing bike with a little less titanium in the engine, and traffic aid is added to make it street legal. Top speed 160 miles an hour, which I think is lethal for a road machine. Honda, of course, keeps saying hasn't just got the power, it's also got the brakes and the handling of a racing machine. In fact, a very special bike because they're only going to make about 8 of them a day. Many of those, I'm sure, will find their way onto racing tracks. It's got to at a price of £8,500. Another new Honda bike that's launched at this show is this one, the NTV 600. Getting a lot of attention because it's aimed specifically at the European market, and because it aims to be really all things to all men, sports, roadster, commuting bike, the lot. Again, it borrows a great deal from bike racing technology, particularly, for example, the design of the front brakes and the cantilevered rear suspension, but it's got a drive shaft instead of a chain for ease of maintenance, reliability, not to mention quietness. The sort of bike I'm sure that Honda, among others, would like to see finding its way into the garages of rising young executives alongside their GTIs. Cost just over £3,000.
Unlike that Honda, most bikes sold here in Britain, because our market is so small, reflect what are already popular in Japan. And over there's a big market for 250cc machines, like this Kawasaki GPX 250R. Small, powerful, good-looking machines. They have high-tech, high-revving engines. This one's tacho actually goes up to 16,000. And the advantages here are reasonable cost, about £2,500, and cheap insurance. Kawasaki is also showing what is claimed to be the biggest engine bike in the world, a 1.5 litre with what's known as stateside styling. At about £5,000 a throw, I don't think there'll be much of a market for it here in Britain.
The Kawasaki GPX 600R and the Suzuki GSX 600F are both examples of a newish breed of motorcycle that all the Japanese manufacturers, including Hondas we've seen, have very high hopes of. The Kawasaki is typical of these super sports middleweights, as they're called, very sophisticated with its liquid-cooled 4-cylinder engine, light and compact. The 16 valves and the 5-speed gearbox ensure the power comes on very smoothly, and it's very keenly priced at around £3,000. Now, if we turn to European manufacturers, BMW, of course, dominate. They've been producing off-road bikes now for some 7 or 8 years. But this year, they've marked the show by producing a truly fearsome monster with a full 1,000cc engine, the largest off-road bike ever produced, quite distinctive in terms of appearance because of the big boxer engine with those projecting cylinder heads. In a sense, I suppose this bike might be called the Range Rover of the bike world. Now, one of these bikes, suitably modified, is being taken on the famous Paris-Dakar bike rally, piloted no less by a mad, or perhaps I should say over-enthusiastic Englishman called Bill Addison, who's gone into special training for the event, because the rally covers no less than 8,000 miles, starting in Versailles, crossing the Sahara Desert, ending up on the west coast of Africa. It takes fully 24 days for these bikes to complete. Before we leave BMW, let's look at a very neat piece of engineering on this bike. This is the rear wheel setup with the wheel hung on this single strut. Now, when you open the throttle and the power comes from this drive shaft, the torque tends to kick the rear wheel into the air. Now, that could be very inconvenient off-road with a 1,000cc engine. So what they've done is to put a secondary lever down here to pin that rear wheel into position. So when you apply the power, the torque goes through the tyre into the ground. Right, now over to Frank Page.
There's also a British bike manufacturing presence here at the show. For example, you can buy a Matchless G80, which is a sort of replica of the bike that was produced in the 50s by Matchless. It's built down in Devon, and it's based on a somewhat undistinguished machine of the 50s. This one has an Austrian engine and components that come from Italy and the Far East. But I think a far more significant revival is here on the stand of Norton, where they're launching their new police bike. It's called the Commander. It's powered by a twin-chamber rotary engine, which is water-cooled, because that's much better for police work in traffic and so on. And it's, I think, very impressively styled. It's got the fairings, got big pannier boxes, got all the switchgear you need, the radio connection for the policeman's headphones, blue lights, the lot, all styled into one very good concept. Well, this is really the first of a whole new generation of Nortons. And also here they've got the classic, the last of the hand-built bikes, and the one they're actually offering to the public. That's the one I've been riding. The police Interpol bikes are already being assembled on a new production line at Norton's Shenstone factory, a facility which will enable the company to increase production while maintaining quality. But the short run of the classic machine is still meticulously hand-assembled with great attention to detail, as it has to be if you have 2,500 parts in a single machine. And this is the finished product. The classic, like the police Interpol bikes, has a twin-rotor air-cooled engine, 5-speed gearbox, fully enclosed chain drive, and I think you'll agree a very high standard of finish. Only 100 of these bikes are to be built to sell at £5,950, but already the customers are queuing up, not only here in Britain, but also, would you believe, in Japan, where it's going to be on show later this month at the Tokyo Motor Show. It's really a lovely blend of old and new, with traditional styling matched by this high-tech rotary engine which develops 80 brake horsepower, should give the bike a maximum potential of about 130 miles an hour. I can't wait to try it. My first impression is of the amazing smoothness of the rotary engine. There's virtually no vibration, and the power delivery is sweet and progressive. The bike's low centre of gravity makes it very agile through the corners, and the suspension is firm but resilient, so the ride quality is good on all but the roughest surfaces. I'm surprised at how flexible the engine is. You can pull away from corners at quite slow revs, because the pulling power is there all the way up from about 2,000 revs. It makes a sweet and responsive touring bike with a snappy turn of speed if you're in a press-on mood. But the Classic has got some fierce competitors at £5,000 to £6,000, even if this one is certain to become a collector's item. But there are other new things coming out of the Norton factory. Not only the new police bike, but also, joyful news for the enthusiasts, a racer. Racing costs a lot of money, so why start on it now?
The power of the engine, really. The rotary engine is extremely powerful. We've been working on the rotary engine for about 15 years, and we have a proven military and police product. We're now going into the civilian market, and we're able to increase the horsepower of the engine from roughly 85 brake horsepower right up to 160 at the top end. At the moment, we're treating the racing program as a mobile test bed to develop new products for the company. We can certainly keep up with any bike on the track along the straights, and we're beginning to get our handling for the corners up to the Japanese standards, but they really do throw a lot of money at these racing bikes, and I would hope by next season we would be at least as competitive as the top Japanese bikes.
Right, well, we've come outside to get a breath of fresh air and to look at this Harley-Davidson bike, because the American bike too is having something of a revival in this country. Now, Harley-Davidson have always had something of a sort of macho cowboy image, a real poser's bike. Now they've gone, if you like, for the other half of the population and produced a female version, which they're calling, for some extraordinary reason, the Hugger. What they've done basically is to lower the rear suspension and pull back the handlebars to fit the smaller frame and give it an altogether softer cushioned seat for the female bottom. Apart from that, it's really traditional Harley-Davidson styling with an 883cc V-twin engine, and it's certainly not cheap at over £4,000. And now, from women to children, this little single-cylinder two-stroke comes from Italy. It's got a single-speed automatic gearbox, governed to a maximum of 20 miles an hour. Very easy to learn to ride, I'm told by Karen, who's demonstrating it now. Cost £519. This little Suzuki costs just about double that, can do 40 miles an hour, and quite apart from the kids, is becoming something of a cult with Japanese businessmen as a way of beating the Tokyo traffic snarl-ups. Right, now for an item on the very important subject of bike safety. Roger Simmons here looks as if he's perfectly suitably dressed, doesn't he, to roar off on this marvellous new 1100cc Suzuki. In fact, he's breaking the law. Why? Well, it's all to do with the material that makes up the visor of his helmet. Frank Page reports.
This is the poster which caused all the problems. Issued by the Department of Transport, it announced the new law and said it would come into effect on the 1st of July this year. But not enough people saw it. A survey carried out by the British Motorcyclists Federation in September found that 66% of motorcyclists still had no idea of the new visor law. That law requires that all visors and goggles must be made of a scratch-resistant material to meet a new British standard. And that means that virtually every visor or pair of goggles sold up to the end of last year is now illegal.
In principle, we're not against it. What we are deeply concerned about is the fact that the law was made retrospective, which is very unusual for a law, and that means that not only was it illegal to buy non-approved visors, it was illegal to wear them, which meant that motorcyclists were completely caught out. Almost nobody knew about it until the law came in on July the 1st.
And the suppliers were caught out too. What's been the effect on the people who have to manufacture and distribute the visors to meet a mushrooming demand for literally hundreds of thousands of them?
I mean, it has given us a big headache due to the lack of publicity from the Department of Transport, basically to the motorcyclist who didn't know that this law was coming out.
So your shops that you sell to are making massive demands on you and you can't supply them, is that right?
At the present time, we are supplying approximately 50% of visors ordered from us.
But how long will it take to get the whole situation resolved?
We hope possibly in 6 months' time we will have most of the customers with illegal visors.
Obviously, the shortage of visors has created headaches for the police too. Can they realistically prosecute offenders until their riders can get the visors? They found a temporary solution.
I realised that the motorcyclists themselves, nor the industry, the manufacturers had the opportunity to abide by the law. So I wrote to all chief constables in this country suggesting that they might like to have a 3-month honeymoon period.
But strictly speaking, the law is still being broken by those people who don't have the right visors.
Oh yes, strictly speaking. And of course, as a result of recent representations from the Motorcycle Association pointing out that the manufacturers would probably take another year to catch up with the estimated demand, what I have done is written again to my fellow chief constables and suggested that they might like to extend that honeymoon period by another 6 months. However, we really can't go on indefinitely because if the riders come to learn that the police are taking no action, then of course they might not bother to buy the visors at all.
Although motorcyclists may not hear of any prosecutions under the new visor law for some time, it has been enacted by Parliament, and from next spring the police will be on the lookout for old-style visors. If you haven't got a new one to the right British standard, you should start looking now.
We said earlier that new bike sales in this country are declining quite seriously, but one area of growing interest is undoubtedly that of classic bikes. Bikes like this 1950 Vincent Rapide, hand-built of course with a 1000cc engine, easily capable of doing well over 100 miles an hour. Not very many were built, so it's very much a collector's item. Cost new about £400, now would set you back at least 6,000. All part, of course, of the modern nostalgia for things of the past, as is perhaps the continuing enthusiasm for the cult of motorcycling. Thousands of people are still prepared to travel hundreds of miles across this country, indeed across Europe, to events like the one organised at Long Marston near Stratford-on-Avon in August of this year.
Motorcycling has always attracted people who love freedom and individuality. They may not conform to everyone's idea of your true enthusiast, but their love of their machines is there for all to see.
It's a whole kind of a social scene. It's very far removed from people who ride motorcycles either for daily transport or sporting purposes as such, although this is obviously a semi-sporting event. But it's people for whom motorcycles occupy a very large part of their life, and all their social relationships, if you like, revolve around the ownership of a motorcycle.
Spread across 75 acres of airfield, over 10,000 pilgrims from as far afield as Sweden and the United States came to pay homage to the cult of the bike. Harley-Davidsons are still ridden by an elite, but most makes can be converted to your own specification, including old British machines like this Triumph.
You'll see very, very few standard factory-produced machines here. People change things around, they rebuild them from scratch. They take new £7,000, £8,000 motorcycles. Within 6 months, they'll strip them down and rebuild them. And these aren't rich people. These are people for whom motorcycles are such an important part of their lifestyle that they will quite willingly expend that time and energy necessary to create something different from the run-of-the-mill mass production bike.
The most popular way of customising a bike is to lower or chop it. This radical example took months of loving work, and it's been shown around Europe.
It's a Harley-Davidson 1979 calf racer, which I've had from 1980 now, so I've had it for quite a few years. And it started out as a calf racer, which I was using for drag racing for 2 years, and now it's into the sort of state that it's in now, like completely transformed really. It's only really stock part now is the engine. Front end is 6-inch over girder forks, which most common people use in building choppers, this sort of thing. Solid front wheel, which again is really from the drag racing side of it.
The rear suspension is based on the monoshock principle as used in current production bikes. There's a single rear shock absorber, and the whole rear end is pivoted about a point just beneath the seat. This 1955 BSA has been lowered, and its carburettors where most aficionados would expect the exhaust. Its owner also has American bikes.
Basically, it's a 1947 Harley-Davidson knucklehead. It's been stroked out to 1440cc. Apart from that, the motor is fairly standard. But the unusual thing about the bike starting from the front is the forks. They're a hybrid design, which I designed about 4 years ago now. There is also an added feature that there's a disc brake on the front, with the brake pipe actually running down through the front leg of the fork itself. This means there's no cables flapping about and keeps the whole thing tidy.
The bike looks as though it has a rigid frame, but the spring is under the seats. The forks are meant to look as though they're all one piece, but in fact they're a clever engineering solution to the problems a bike this shape poses. And there's a novel hand gear change. Another trend is to make custom bikes look like drag racers, even though they're not quite as fast. Others don't take their machine so seriously. This Harley-Davidson has all the classic Harley features, like the dials on the tank, but horrors, it's got a Yamaha engine. So this style of biking is still alive and kicking, but what sort of people come to these events?
Yeah, people, I guess, largely these days in their 20s and 30s, who've been through the motorcycle thing as a kid. Maybe they were rockers in the 60s or even earlier ton-up boys, and they stuck with motorcycles rather than to convert to Ford Sierras. They're family people as well. There's kids here, but they've stuck with the motorcycle way of life, and an event like this they just flock to.
Well, that's all for this week from the bike show here at the NEC. If you're thinking of visiting the show, let me remind you it's open from 10 until 7 p.m. every day until the 12th of October. I'm sorry we couldn't bring you the item on damage to motorways in this programme. It was advertised. We shall be including that item later in the series. And before I go, let me tell you a bit about next week. In the Top Gear Car of the Decade series, we look at a 1930s Citroën Traction Avant. We road test the Mazda 626, and we get stuck in at the tractor pulling event at Silverstone. So see you then, same time, same place, 8:30 Thursday, BBC Two. Till then, drive safely. Good night.
The 9 o'clock news has just started over on BBC One, to be followed by another look at life in oldie England that somehow escaped the history books when Blackadder III, thinly disguised as Rowan Atkinson, seeks out the anarchists. Here on 2 in a minute, we go moonlighting.
There's erudite conversation for the new season on BBC Two.
Guess what I am now then?
If you like.
Right, like I'm square, right? And I've got like 2 wheels on me, right? And I'm towed behind a car.
I'll give up.
No, go on, guess.
You're towed behind a car?
That's right, yeah.
You're a horse box?
No! I'm a trailer! I'm a trailer for Smith & Jones, you get it?
You want to know what else you are?
Mel and Griff, Alas, Smith & Jones return next Thursday at 9 on BBC Two.
Now on to our next stop is Murder, as we join Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis, Moonlighting.